Welcome, everybody, to the Melissa Killeleagh Show. I am your host. Today is Tuesday, August 21st, and we are live in the Finger Lakes One TV studio with a couple of really special guests today. This episode is brought to you by the notion that it takes a village, right? So we talk about this a lot in education, but for me, this really just applies to all areas of life. It truly takes a village to live, to love, to lead successfully in this world. So for those of you who don't know me, again, Melissa Killeleagh, your host of the Melissa Killeleagh Show. I am what I refer to as a mompreneur who is always balancing the busyness of a home-based business and taking care of my 2-year-old son, Jack. And one of the reasons why I decided to start this show is just to share more of the real news in the world, the positive news, the things that are happening out and about in the world to inspire and uplift you. And so typically I take you on a journey of learning about a woman who's making the world a better place, a man who's making a difference, different things out and about in the community, and then we'll wrap up with some ideas and inspiration. So today, our first guest is LeaAnn Fuller. I met this woman through a networking community called WBOC, which is out of Syracuse, New York. It's Women, Business, Opportunities, and Connections. And LeaAnn recently left her full-time job to pursue her entrepreneurial spirit. She is the founder of Fuller Life, and she is a coach. She's a speaker. She's a dynamic facilitator. And she's got an interesting story to share with us today, because one of the other things that my guests share in common today is that they typically are really being a voice for other people who aren't necessarily able to use their own voices to speak as loudly as we would like them to. So LeaAnn is advocating for a book that she has recently published that she would like to get out into the community. And without further ado, I'm going to let her share this story. All right, so we are here with LeaAnn Fuller from Fuller Life. She is a life coach and a facilitator. I met LeaAnn through the WBOC in Syracuse, Women, Business, Opportunities, and Connections. It's a great networking group that meets the first Wednesday of every month. So if anyone wants to learn more about that, please feel free to reach out to either one of us. But one of the things that LeaAnn is working on right now really hit my heart in a big way. And so I wanted to have her on the show and share a little bit more about this project she's working on. LeaAnn is, so she recently left her full-time 9-to-5 to pursue her own business with Fuller Life. And LeaAnn, I'm just grateful that you're taking the time. We can share some of the things that you're doing with our viewers and hopefully give a little call to action to bring you into our community and other communities around the Finger Lakes to share more of what you're doing. So thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am so glad to be here.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're here too. So let's talk a little bit about the transition before we get into like the work that you're doing right now. Let's talk about the transition of, going from 9-to-5 to this entrepreneurial life, because I know that you've been working on your business for longer than just, recent months. It's part of who you are. And I was so intrigued when I met you, because when I think about even just the concept of Fuller Life, of living a fuller life, you embody that. And so share a little bit about, your background, your experience, and the journey that got you here.
Okay, so I'm a mother of 3 girls, and I have always been what I like to call serial entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And at one point, I was a single mom for many years of my girls, so I always worked 2 to 3 jobs and had my own business of some sort on the side. I went through multiple multi-level marketing, had my own bookkeeping business, and so I've always been like a serial entrepreneur. And so the thing with that is I'd always done something, but I wasn't overly passionate about any of those things that I did. And I find that is so huge for women, is just getting into something that they're passionate about. And it took me a long time to do that. And so I one day, I had a mental breakdown and it was actually such a huge blessing for me. I had my boss and my mentor say to me, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And at this point in my life, I didn't even know what I was going to feed my children for dinner. Had no food in my house, had nothing, had no clue. So how on earth could I even remotely think about what I was going to do, not only for dinner tonight, a week, a month, let alone 5 years from then? So that really set me down this path of self-discovery and led me to coaching. And I came across this somewhere, heard something on the radio and then the newspaper and magazines. And you know how when you're just so drawn to something, it just keeps showing up in your life. Mm-hmm. And eventually it's like it's throwing darts at you. It's like, holy crap, maybe I better listen. So that's what's kind of led me to here. And I've been saying, so I started this journey of self-discovery and into transitioning to being a coach and starting my business as a Fuller life coach and a facilitator, because that's what I do. Is I help women discover what that fuller life is. I help facilitate that for them. What does it look like for them? And we kind of go from there, because it's different for everybody. And so I've been at my job. I've had 2 jobs, actual jobs in my life. But I've been at this one for about 5 years. And so I started this business about 3 years ago. I went through the Coach U, got my training there. And I was done there, I think, in 2015. So it's been about 3 years now I've been on this journey. And I've been saying, okay, in June, I'm done. This is it. June is my date. I'm going out on my own. I'm giving this thing a go, because we always prolong what we want to do. We look for that security, and there's not always security in your own business. And right. So we want that security, want to know we have that income. And it's a little scary to kind of jump out on your own. And I kept saying June, actually last year I kept saying June. So then this year, June. Well, as it turns out, come June, I didn't have a job anymore. So it's like, hey, here we go. It was just that push off the cliff that I needed. And there was no backing out of this, June. I had no choice. So here I am. And I'm embracing this journey, and it's been amazing. It's not always easy, but it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth having that, your freedom, and you building your own business instead of other people's businesses. Because so many of us, we go out and we build someone else's dream instead of our own. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm at now.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I resonate with a lot of your story. Obviously, like, I'm a single mom. I have a 2-year-old son. I work from home in my own business. I left the world of 9 to 5 in the fall of 2014. And I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to take that leap of faith. But I feel like you're so on it right there when you talk about how, and I don't even think it's just women, but particularly women.
Yeah.
When we're pursuing our passion and our purpose on this planet, we are literally part of the change in the world, right? So when people say, be the change, the more we can empower human beings, and particularly women, to live out their passion and their purpose, that is the change.
Yes.
Right? Because we have happier, more fulfilled humans on this planet, which is very different than, people who are going to work feeling like they're living this quiet life of desperation and hiding behind a desk somewhere, right? It's a very different thing. Mm-hmm. So, ladies and gentlemen, right now we're talking to LeaAnn Fuller. You can find her on lovingyourfullerlife.com. And she's an incredible coach and facilitator. But what really struck me, and the reason why I wanted to have her come on the show today, is this project that she's working on right now. So she is currently, LeaAnn, you're working on really marketing and getting a book out there.
Yes, I am.
So talk to us about that, and talk to us about like your vision and your mission here.
Okay, so yeah, so actually the book is Saved by Grace. So here's the book, and it's Saved by Grace. It's opening doors for wounded women walking. And the stories in this book are from the women of Exodus House in Syracuse, New York. And these stories in this book from these women, they are so vulnerable and so powerful because it shows some of the darkest things that some of us women go through. They're like, so many of us are suffering in silence with these different things, such as abuse, rape, drug addiction, depression. And these are a lot of the things that are these women are sharing for their stories in this book. And so about 2 years ago, just the backstory a little bit, I have an Adopt a Mom program. And a couple of years ago, the women of Exodus House were nominated to get gifts for Christmas, because what I do is I've been doing it since basically my mom's last Christmas. We knew it was her last Christmas. It kind of sucked, and I wanted to do something. So the best way to make yourself feel better is to do something for somebody else. So that's what I did. And throughout this process, I was introduced to Exodus House, and I delivered the gifts there to Deborah, who is the founder of Exodus 3 Ministries and the founder of Exodus House. And it was an instant connection for us because I have other books out there, and she saw that I was an author, and I wasn't 2 minutes away, and she called me up. She's like, girl, we really need to talk. These women have such powerful stories, and we need to get them out there. And so this journey began of Saved by Grace, and it was supposed to be a little bit shorter journey, but this book has evolved so much. And not only are we sharing these stories for these women, because there's something so healing about getting your story out there. Mm-hmm. Even if you just write your story down, because so many of us are just suffering in silence. We think we are alone in the darkness, and we're not. There are people who have been there. There are people that are still there, and we need to reach out and ask for help. We need to support each other. We need to build each other up. We need to know that there's hope out there. We need to spread the hope and spread the light for other people who are just drowning in this darkness. And that's what this book is all about, is getting these stories out so that, number one, these women of Exodus House could begin their healing process. And so many of us turn to addictions, whether it's drug addiction, sex, food, you name it. There's any addiction, really.
Right.
And so often it goes deeper than the addiction. Addiction has no prejudice. It doesn't care how much money you make. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter who your parents are, where you live, where you've been. It doesn't matter. And so what we need to do, and what this book does, is it is encouraging women to dig deeper than the addiction, to figure out what is really going on, what is driving me to these lengths that are just something that no one would choose, but you feel like you need to hide somewhere. So we go down these dark tunnels and hide there because we don't know any different, and we don't know that we can get over this, we can get past that. And that's really what this book is all about, is getting women past that point so that they can dig deeper. And as I said, this book has evolved. It was supposed to actually be out, I think, last October, but it has evolved into so much. It's not only these women's stories. There's a journal in there for you to actually get your story out. I have my 5 steps in there of what you really need to do to dig deep. You need to acknowledge what's going on, and you need to accept that, holy crap, this happened to me, but it's not who I am. Right. It may be a part of me, but it's not who I am. It doesn't define me.
Right.
And you need to appreciate it. And so many of us, like, holy crap, how do you appreciate somebody raping you or molesting you or anything? Because like I said, we've all been through something. And how do you appreciate that? But we have to realize that makes us who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to allow ourselves to forgive. We have to allow ourselves to move on, to get past this, to get over this, and allow ourselves to be great. Because that's really what it's all about. So many of us get stuck in this suffering. We get stuck suffering in what's happened to us or where we've been. We get stuck as a victim. And it's all about becoming a warrior, becoming a survivor, becoming a warrior, and moving on and getting over these hurdles. And so then we're set to release. And I'm like, this book needs to be in shelters. I would love to see this book in shelters across the country and even beyond. And so we did a little campaign to have some local, not only local, but other women sponsor shelters to have these books sent to, which turned out to be big and getting bigger. I mean, that's still even an option to sponsor these shelters, to get these books in the shelters so that it's reaching some of these women that it really needs to reach, that are really stuck in that dark place right now, that don't know where to go. They don't know where to begin. And there's also a resource section in the back of the book that not only covers the resources in our local central New York, Syracuse, New York area, but nationwide. There's help out there. So that's also become an addition to the book. So this book has evolved into something so huge, and it's becoming so much more. It's becoming kind of a beacon of hope and a beacon of light for women who are just feel like they're stuck as a victim. They're stuck in that suffering and they don't know where to begin. And so it's really, not only is it sharing the stories of women who have been there, but it's also a beginning to guiding them out of the darkness so that they can move on.
I absolutely love what you're doing here. And, I know you don't know this about me yet, but I love quotes. And so as you were speaking, like a number of quotes popped into my head. Brene Brown, owning our story is perhaps the bravest thing we can ever do. So yes. I think about these women owning their story, and it also encouraging the reader to own their story by having a template. The other thing that I think about is Marianne Williamson, talking about how like we have to let our own light shine in order to give others permission to do the same. All of these women, through their stories, through their own healing, through their own vulnerability, are giving other women everywhere who get their hands on this permission to really stand in that light and stand in their truth and share that with the world as well. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yes.
So, and I can think of local organizations we definitely need to reach out to and partner with. And so if any of you viewing are connected to them, Finger Lakes, Safe Harbors, or Safe Harbors of the Finger Lakes, and there's a few other organizations I can think of that will be great to connect with and really think about sponsoring some books to get these books into other women's hands. So LeaAnn, before we wrap up, one of the things I want to know, just because this is always my curiosity with human beings, is like, we can hear a little bit about the why behind what you do. Like you literally are living your why, from the threads of being the single mother to being that entrepreneur to knowing that you can live a fuller life and showing other people how to do the same thing. What do you want your legacy to be? Like when you fast forward in life and you look back, like what are you beginning now with your vision that you hope to magnify in the course of your life?
So as far as my legacy goes, I want to be known as, it's so hard talking about your legacy, isn't it? You really have to think big when you're thinking about that. But really, I want to be that person that if you have come into contact with me, you have been empowered and you are that much better for it. And that's my legacy I want to leave. I want to leave the legacy that I have brought light and love to so many people, because love is what's going to cure the world, not hate. There's so much bitterness and hate and just all the horrible things going on out there. And whether it is just through a smile, because you don't very often see me out and about where I'm not smiling. I go through the store, talk to random people, and my kids are like, "Who's that?" I don't know. I talk to everybody. It doesn't matter. So I just want to be known and I want my legacy to be that I made a difference. I made a difference in women's lives who needed it, who may not have had that otherwise. Like these women and all of the women that this book can touch, that is what I want my legacy to be, is that I actually gave a shit and I made the difference. Mm-hmm. And I put myself out there. I may not be perfect, but I will definitely be real. And that's what I want to be known for. That's what I want my legacy to be. I just want to be that person that shines light and just gets yourself out there and makes a difference.
Beautiful. And you're living it day by day, step by step, book by book. You're doing it. So thank you. So to all of our viewers, again, this is LeaAnn Fuller of Fuller Life. She's the founder. She's a facilitator and life coach. You can find her at livingafullerlife.com. Oh, I said that wrong. Lovingyourfullerlife.com.
Yes.
And we'll also have that posted for you. So LeaAnn, thank you so much for joining us today. You truly are a woman who is making the world a better place. And I'm just grateful to know that I can walk alongside you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it and helping get this book out there, because it needs to be out there. It needs to be in the hands of the women that really, truly need it and need that help and just need to know that there's hope out there. There's light past the darkness.
Absolutely. So if you're watching this and you are someone or know someone who will sponsor books for an organization out there to get these books into women's hands in different shelters, whether it's in your local community or throughout the U.S., please reach out to LeaAnn. The website is listed below. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. LeaAnn Fuller from Fuller Life, sharing her story on the books that she's trying to get out there into the world and into the hands of women who need them. So again, if you're someone who would like to sponsor books or get your hand on one, I will be putting the link to the Amazon shopping in the comments on Facebook. So if you're watching this on the Finger Lakes One portal, or in the comments on YouTube. So just stay tuned and you'll be looking at that. But you can also go to lovingyourfullerlife.com and you'll find a link to the book there as well. So today we're going to switch gears now, but we're staying in this same concept of the fact that it does take a village. So you feel in LeaAnn's message her desire to be part of the village that lifts women up and helps shine a light to really shine out that darkness, right? And in my own life, our next guest has been a particular light for me, an incredible light for me. So a while back, he was a mentor for me while I was in graduate school and volunteering with an organization called the Village at Ithaca Initiative, which was an initiative to help eliminate race and class as predictors of success in the Ithaca City School District. And this is where we really talk about that concept of it taking a village. But beyond that initiative, Cal Walker is an incredible entrepreneur and activist working in so many different areas. I've always admired the fact that he sort of just rolls up his sleeves and gets his hand into the community in as many ways as he possibly can, but has had quite an adventure over the last 5 years or so. And so he's here with us in the studio. I'm so grateful, and I'm happy to see you, Cal.
Well, thank you very much, my friend. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the invitation. Look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first met, you were working full-time at Cornell, and you were extremely active in your church, in the community, with the Village at Ithaca Initiative, and so many other projects. So I would love for you to just share a little bit with our viewers about your background, your experience, the sort of calling that you have had to the kind of community work that you do.
Well, I'll be happy to share that. I like to start by letting folks know anytime I'm sharing about my background is that I was born in 1954 in Montgomery, Alabama. And for people who are aware of history and the civil rights struggle, Montgomery was really one of the epicenters of a lot of things that happened in this country, helped shape this country, challenged this country to be what it ought to be. Moved to Tuskegee, another very famous and historic place. And then my family was part of this massive migration of black folk from the South to the North looking for better opportunity. Now, the reason I like to share with folk where my roots are and where I started is that being in an environment such as Montgomery and Tuskegee in the 50s and the early 60s really helped to shape my social consciousness.
Absolutely.
And so that has become a thread that has really kind of defined my life and my priorities as I have moved forward. So I live in Ithaca. I've been there for 42 years. I graduated college. I went to a predominantly black college in North Carolina. And I went back to Syracuse, got hired immediately with Procter & Gamble as a regional sales representative. And I did that for 15 years. After which I went to Cornell University, where I've been employed for 25 years. You're right, I did start an organization called the Village at Ithaca back in 2002. As you mentioned it, from the African proverb, it takes a whole village to raise a child. Education has always been one of the passions for me. I'm a parent, I'm a foster parent, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a social activist, I'm a concerned and involved citizen. I like to think I'm a very dependable friend, but whatever hat I am wearing influences my lens and how I see the world. And when I look at the world, I see a lot of inequity. I see a lot of structural inequity. There's an old saying that systems are perfectly designed to get the results that they get. And when I looked at the educational system and thought about some of my own educational experiences, my activist bent trended toward the educational system, the public educational system, the development of young people, and has really become kind of the thing around which much of my activity has revolved over the years.
Fantastic. And that was the point at which our paths crossed. You know, you were really in the heart of bringing this Village at Ithaca initiative to the world, to light, and bringing all of the people in the community around this concept. And at the time, I was just getting into graduate school and realizing that education is very much a passion of mine as well. I attribute my own education and, learning, literacy, all of these things attached to education to being the forces and the circumstances that got me out of what could have been an otherwise dire, future. So I'm grateful that our paths crossed for so many different reasons. And one thing that has stayed with me is this incredible resilience that you have. And so I always wonder in that face of resilience, like when I'm looking at that sort of strength. Someone said it to me really beautifully the other day. She said, when the root is strong, you never have to fear the wind. Right?
I love it.
And I think of you when I think of those kinds of concepts. So what inspires you? What keeps you going? Obviously the roots that you have are strong and deep. And I can certainly imagine being in the climate that you were in, the social climate that you were in as a young man growing up, how it did shape this social consciousness. But what continues to motivate you? What continues to inspire you? Who are some of your mentors on this path?
Okay, multifaceted question. So let me talk about what inspires me. And let's focus on the educational piece.
Yeah.
And there are other hats that I wear. So Frederick Douglass, and it's interesting to invoke his name in this beautiful studio. There's a picture of Frederick Douglass on the board. Certainly this region, Rochester and the related areas, Frederick Douglass has historical roots there. Frederick Douglass said, among many things, that education is liberation. And I'm a literalist, and things like that just really resonate powerfully with me. And so what motivated me to focus on education? So I have always been a very good student in school. As I mentioned earlier, my family moved up from Alabama to Syracuse. I went through the rest of elementary school, junior high school, which they now call middle school, and then high school there. And when people ask me about high school, a lot of wonderful things happened. I was a student leader. I did a lot of stuff. But when people ask me about high school, the first thing that always comes to my mind, even though I've been out of high school 55 years, 56, 7 years, something like that, is sophomore year, 10th grade, first day of class. And I'm going to tie this to education and what inspires me.
Yeah.
I went to my Algebra 2 class. You know, you get your schedule at the beginning of the year, and then you go to classes. I think it was like third period or something like that. And I went to my Algebra 2 class, and I sat down. I was in the second row from the far end wall. And my teacher, and I still remember her name, walked over to me while she was talking about the syllabus and all this other thing. And she gave me a note. So you need to go see your guidance counselor. And so I left, and I went to see my guidance counselor. And the guidance counselor was really busy at that time, told me to come back later in the day. I did, and the guidance counselor had looked into why the teacher had sent me down to their office on the first day. And the guidance counselor sheepishly admitted, matter of fact, I had to pull it out of him. You know what the problem was? The teacher thought I was in the wrong class. This is an Algebra 2 class, and it turns out, upon further investigation, that teacher, and I'm biting my tongue not to say her name, had never had an African-American male student in her Algebra 2 class as a sophomore. Wow. And so for me, that spoke volumes. Now, it's not like I didn't realize that within the educational system, when it came to black students, there was already this perception of lower intelligence, lower achievement levels, not quite ready for prime time education, all this kind of stuff. And so to be an African-American male student in this lady's Algebra 2 class as a sophomore, second year in high school, somehow seemed unusual, anomaly. Your schedule must be wrong. Right. And so one of the things that has inspired me to focus on education has been this systemic perception. And things have certainly evolved over time, thank God. But this systemic perception of lower expectations of certain students because of race and increasingly class and eventually disability and all those other kinds of things. So that stayed with me. That stayed with me. I said, this is not just this teacher. This is systemic. Right. And so that for me became an area of focus when I came to Ithaca. We got Cornell University, we got Ithaca College, we got an elite, when I say elite, I don't mean that in some judgmental sense. We got an excellent community college in Tompkins Cortland Community College. The educational system is really, really good in Ithaca. Right. But it works really well for certain students and not as well for some other students. Correct. And so as you correctly mentioned early on, starting the village, one of the primary areas of focus was to deconstruct what now has become part of regular vernacular, public vernacular, this achievement gap. We weren't using that language back then, but we knew what it was. We knew that there were gross disproportionality in the educational system, predictable based on race, class, and ethnicity. And so, as you mentioned, the Ithaca City School District came up with a strategic equity plan to eliminate race, class, and disability as predictors of academic success. And quite honestly, and I say this all in candor, with all humility, there's no question that the Village at Ithaca helped push that level of consciousness, commitment, and vision to create what some people described as a rather audacious goal.
Yeah. Well, what's so interesting there's so much of that, Cal. I mean, we could just focus on this for the next 6 hours or weeks, right? But I think about it, and a couple of things strike me. One of the reasons why I was so passionate to jump on board and get involved with the Village at Ithaca initiative is because I was seeing what was happening for our students in our schools. having firsthand conversations with them and understanding from my own research as I moved on, within my MPA to start looking at some of the doctorate level education classes, what was happening across the US and what the system really looked like, and understanding everything that you're saying to be very true. And yet it stood in stark contrast to my own experience, because my education is what got me out of Buffalo, New York. It's what got me out of the neighborhood that I grew up in. So having gone to City Honors High School, where diversity and multiculturalism were so valued that I was the minority, right? That's when I knew what an incredible gift I had been given and felt compelled to give that back, to be part of something that could change the system, to give that back. And the thing that I love about your approach and the way that you seem to approach everything when it comes to your level of social consciousness is that there are different ways to resist, right? You weren't the person who was standing out on the sidelines during the Board of Education elections with, signs and protesting. And there's a place for all of that, for sure.
Absolutely.
But your approach has come from this place of shining the light so bright that people can't help but see the reality, and you can't help but shine out that darkness, which is exactly what I was talking about before. And I'm so grateful because between you and my dear friend and mentor, Melissa Killeleagh, I learned that approach and continue to employ that in my own life and hopefully pass that on to other people, because that is a way of resisting that just brings everyone into the picture and calls everyone to action. And I love it and admire it. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. We're just honored to have had you as really the first person to come and become part of the Village at Ithaca as an intern, as whatever role or however your title or whatever the role you played at that particular time. You were the first. Mm-hmm. And I have always remembered and appreciate that, because quite frankly, you set a standard as other college students look to come in. I know you were working on a master's program at the time, but as other college students found out about the work of the Village, it resonated with them. They wanted to become involved. And frankly, and I don't know if I've ever said this, but this is the honest truth, you were really the standard by which we judge future applicants.
Thank you.
You set a really high bar, and you were really catalytic to helping to facilitate some of the growth, development, and expansion of our organization.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
We appreciate you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about some of these other hats that you wear. I know one recently that you and I have discussed at greater length that I hadn't known so much about back then is your role as a foster care parent. So again, another avenue through which you're able to really be a stable and guiding light and an advocate for the children of our world. So, and when I say of our world, I want our viewers to understand this is not a family that has taken in one or two children. This is somebody who has fostered going on the 49th child.
Absolutely. Yeah. Over the last 20 years, my wife Linda and I have had the pleasure, the privilege, the honor really, to have 48 children come into our home as part of the foster care system. People often ask, how long do they stay? It varies. So I think the shortest placement was probably 2 or 3 months. The longest placement, frankly, was we had a little boy that stayed with us for 5 years, but let me hasten to say that was not 5 continuous years. There were 2 trial discharges that did not work out, and we wanted that child to come back to our home rather than go to yet a different foster home. Mm-hmm. The largest individual placement we has had was a 5-person sibling group.
Wow.
Ages 3, 9, 12, 14, and 16. And what's interesting about that is that at that time we had, I don't know, maybe 35 foster children, and the 2 previous children had just left, mm-hmm. and we decided we would take a break. And matter of fact, we had started this pretty substantial remodeling project. Mm-hmm. 2 days after the boys who were siblings left, and the Department of Social Services called and wanted us to take the 2 oldest of these 5 children And I actually went down to the Department of Social Services to pick them up, and long story short, came back home with 3, including the 3-year-old.
Okay.
And then within 2 days, we had the other 2, so we had 5. So we took that entire family in, and it was a lot of fun. And but 5 is the largest single intake that we had, and at that time we had another child in the house who was not.
I have to pause you for a second, because what that makes me think of is that notion or quote about, like when you start making plans in life, tell God, right? And he laughs, and yeah, you end up.
Absolutely. We did not want those children separated, and they would have gone into 3 separate foster homes. It was, no, we're not having this. And so even though we had thought we were going to be taking a break, opportunity presented itself, and we knew that this was something that we could accommodate, and we did. So yeah, we have been foster parents. We thoroughly enjoyed. It's really a calling, and these children deserve a supportive, encouraging, positive, affirming, unconditional love home. Sometimes parents, for whatever reason, and we make no judgments about the parents and why children are in foster care, but sometimes parents are just simply not able to provide those things for their children. And I am thankful, we are thankful, that there are systems in place that offer viable alternatives, temporary placements for children while parents work to deal with whatever challenges they may be facing. Sometimes the children go back to their parents, sometimes, frankly, they don't. And other kinds of permanency are in place. But we enjoy that. I'm just fascinated by children. I've mentored children, I've tutored children, I've counseled children. Those are hats that I've worn in parallel to working at Procter & Gamble and then Cornell over what's a collective 40 years of working. I've always been involved in the lives of children. And one of the things I love to tell children is that you are unique in all of creation. And often there's nothing special about me. No, you are wrong. There are 7 billion people on the planet, and I don't care what continent you're on, you will not find an exact identical replica of you. That means that you are the only one of your kind. That never was, is not now, nor will there ever be another you. And by definition, that makes you a one-of-a-kind, original. You're unique. And things that are original, authentic, unique, have inestimable value, and you are valuable. And sometimes it's really the first time that a child has been able to look at himself or herself as something special, something valuable, something that should be invested in. Right? And so I like doing stuff like that.
Okay, I'm not going to cry right now, but I can appreciate that so deeply, because we are seeing quite a crisis, even right here in our own community right now, with the amount of children who need that love and care and support and need to hear those words. So thank you for saying them, because hopefully people who are watching can share them with some of those children.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah. So recently, you've gone through some of your own trials and tribulations.
Yes.
And, it makes me think of, there was, and you're going to laugh when I tell you who it makes me think of, but I think of Ram Dass back in the 60s. He was like, one of those guys who wrote one of those trippy books, like Be Here Now. He was involved in, the hippie movement and all this psychedelic drugs and all this crazy stuff. But the reason why it makes me think of him is because he wrote this book, Be Here Now, and it did have a profound impact on our culture at the time, in the way that it was really calling people to be present in their lives. Back then, we're talking about that a lot now, but back in the 60s and 70s, he was asking for that. And then he went through a lot of health struggles. I think he either had couple of heart attacks or stroke or some major things happened. But, he then wrote another book and then went on to do a lot of speaking engagements talking about what it's like to try to live out those principles when you're not living in ideal circumstances. And so I think of you because you have always operated at this really fast pace, and you've been out there doing as much as you can, service above self for so many other people, and recently went through some pretty incredible health challenges yourself. And I would love it if you would just share a little bit about that journey with our viewers, because it was inspiring to me, and I can't imagine that there are people out there who won't be inspired by it.
I would love to. So I have always been healthy. minimal sicknesses and no diseases and those kinds of things. 3 years ago, I went to bed one night and I was full of vim, vigor, and vitality, looking forward. Matter of fact, it was Friday night, and I was looking forward to the next morning because there were some particular projects that I was going to do. And I got up the next morning, and Melissa, I could not walk from my bed to my bathroom. It's only I could only walk 4 steps. It's about 8-10 steps to the bathroom. And I'm thinking, what in the world is wrong with me? I was tired. I was not in any pain. I was extremely tired. And I had to sit down after 4 steps. And 7 days later, I had lost 21 pounds. My energy level was as low as I ever remember it being. And I was an athlete in high school, and I was always putting out a lot of energy and everything else, but I've never been that tired in my life. Well, I was going to the doctor on average about every 2-3 days or so, all kinds of diagnostic tests and all this kind of thing. I was hospitalized after about 10 days and ultimately would be experiencing severe sickness for a month without a diagnosis. Incredible. I was in the hospital in Ithaca, constantly being checked. Every test was coming back in the normal range. Ultimately, there was a diagnosis, peripheral T-cell lymphoma. By then, I had lost 30-something pounds. I looked like I was wasting away. I had no energy. I knew that was not sustainable. Nobody can survive like that.
Right.
And when the nurse who was in the room, when the doctor came in and said peripheral T-cell lymphoma, heard that news, and she printed out a document and she said, Mr. Walker, I'm sorry that this is your diagnosis. We're going to do everything we can to get you the best medical care. It was a multi-page document, and at the very top, it said, without immediate treatment, survival for a peripheral T-cell lymphoma is normally a few short weeks. I was at the end of week 4.
Wow.
And so it is no exaggeration to say that had I not gotten a diagnosis when I did, I simply would have died. That is absolutely, definitively medically supported. And I have since learned that the particular diagnosis that I had, for a variety of reasons, people don't normally survive. And so the journey that I was on involved 5 months of the most aggressive chemo that can be administered, at the end of which, and they told me this up front, they said, you're going to have to go through this, and then your body is going to need to heal because it's going to really be put through the ringer, because we have got to throw everything at this because this is our best and only chance to keep you alive. And they said, after this 5 months, you're going to need to rest up, and then you're going to need to spend the summer in Buffalo at Roswell Park Cancer Institute, where I underwent a bone marrow stem cell transplant. And so literally for a 13-month period, December of 2014, January through December of 2015, it was all about treatment and the regrowth of an immune system, basically. Right. And so through that journey, what did I learn? I learned to be much more present, much more in tune with myself, meaning my life was always moving at a pretty frenetic pace. I was involved in a lot of things. I was blessed to be able to serve my community in myriad different ways. Never felt burnout, never felt tired about stuff. If a new opportunity came along and I was asked to get involved in something and I thought I could make a value-added contribution, I would just figure out how to add it onto a plate, or in my case, a platter. Well, that all came to a crushing halt, basically. Right. And you know what I've discovered? I've discovered that for me, that was really, that has created a gift of time. Because now I am much more contemplative, I am much more deliberate, I am much more present. A good friend of mine shared a quote with me that he heard from somebody else. He said, Cal, look, man, we are human beings. We are not human doings. And I was doing at the expense of being.
Right.
And now I really have time to be. I have time to be present. I have time to be focused. I have time to meditate. I have more time to pray. I have more time to read. I have more time to be. And frankly, this would not have happened without some major interruption. And that word reminds me of what was spoken prophetically to me when I was in the hospital. The chaplain, one of the chaplains at the hospital, came in and said, "Cal," he said, "look, I've known you a long time. I know that you're, Mr. Energizer Bunny in the community. Certainly there's going to be a diagnosis, and then you're going to start getting treated." He was encouraging me. But he said, in his spirit, he sensed that interruption of illness, his quote was, "Cal, I think this interruption is going to lead to a great invitation." And nothing has been more prophetic, because now there's an invitation. Oh my God, I wish we had time to talk about some of the things that I'm able to do now, and as a result of this invitation. And I just want to tell your viewing audience, at age 64, I'm taking swimming lessons.
I love it.
I have always wanted to learn to swim, never could figure it out, and decades ago I forget this. I'm just going to stay away from the water, other than the shower and the bathtub, of course, and just forget about it. But you know what? I decided a few months ago that I would start taking swimming lessons, and I'm doing that. I'm getting back into biking. And I mentioned earlier, at the onset of this illness, I couldn't walk 4 steps. When I was lying in the hospital bed on the 5th floor at Roswell Park Cancer Institute in Buffalo, in the middle of a stem cell transplant that kept me there for weeks, I remember saying, because I couldn't walk 4 steps at the outset of this illness, I am going to push myself and be disciplined and regain my strength and energy to the point that I will walk minimally 4 miles a day.
Love it.
And I'm happy to say that so far this year, and this is the month of August, I have averaged 4.3 miles per day up to this point. And so that's a constant reminder of where I was. And I have an attitude of gratitude with each passing day about where I am.
It's fantastic. And, I think about, you've shared some of the things with me that you've been able to do because of this invitation. And, one of the things was the several talks you and I have had as we have reconnected, because the first reconnection was this text message that I got from my aunt. And it wasn't her writing. And she had connected with you at Roswell. And from that, bringing our paths back together, being able to sit in the middle of the afternoon and have a conversation. And, it always leaves me inspired and recharged to go out and do the work that I do in the world. We wouldn't be able to have those kinds of conversations without that interruption. Right. So, but the other thing is, I know that you also have become an independent associate for an organization called Legal Shield, which is a little bit of a switching gears, but I know we need to wrap up shortly. And I want to talk about this because, first of all, I know I'm going to be one of your clients.
Thank you.
But Legal Shield is an incredible organization, and one of the benefits here is this model of business, which is a network marketing company, allows you to create this mutual benefit. It's not just you pouring into all of the community, all of the other people. This is an organization where your efforts can actually greatly benefit people in their access to the kinds of services that Legal Shield provides, but also can help you build your legacy moving forward in this lifetime. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about Legal Shield and also your legacy.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to do that. So I've always been entrepreneurial. Even the collective 40 years of working for a global corporation, Procter & Gamble, Cornell, a distinguished Ivy League institution for 25 years. So the combined 40 years of work, I have always been entrepreneurial, and I have always focused on direct marketing types of business, A, because I couldn't afford the startup costs of a traditional brick and mortar business, and 2, didn't want to have to deal with the significant overhead, employees, payroll, all that kind of thing. So I've always gravitated toward direct marketing business, probably for about 35 years or so. Legal Shield is probably the 4th direct marketing company I've ever been associated with, but it is by far the first company that I have been able to be completely, unequivocally all in, because everything about this company and what we do resonates with me. Fundamentally, I have always been about justice, fairness, and equality of opportunity. And, one of the tenets of this country is, and in fact, it's in the pledge, with liberty and justice for all. As wonderful and as idealistic as that sounds, it is simply not the real lived experiences of a lot of people. Legal Shield is a company that was founded some 46 years ago for the express purpose of creating greater access to the justice system. I am an independent associate with Legal Shield, and what we do, quite simply, is help to create access to the justice system where people can consult with an entire law firm. And the reason that's important, notice I didn't just say connect people with a lawyer. No lawyer specializes in all areas of law, just like no doctor specializes in all areas of medicine. And so we create opportunities for our members to connect with a law firm for consultation on an unlimited number of topics without the high hourly costs. And many attorneys are charging $250, $300 an hour. And if you think about an hourly wage earner, the average income, the median income for families in a lot of communities, that is a huge sacrifice for some folks, and basically it shuts them out of the justice system. Legal Shield, what we're doing is we are essentially leveling the playing field by creating access to the justice system in ways that are simple, easy, and most importantly, affordable. And we're doing that for almost 2 million members right now, and that number is growing. We're in all 50 states and 4 provinces in Canada.
Fantastic. So that being a piece of it, what is your legacy, Cal? What is the legacy you are going to leave us with on this planet?
Directly related to Legal Shield or just globally?
All of it.
In terms of a legacy, and I think about legacy a lot, and it's not just because I hate to say flirted with death, but let's just say that experience has certainly made mortality more real, and just something that I think about. So in terms of a legacy, my legacy will be multidimensional. I want people to be able to say, Cal lived a life of purpose. He helped others along the way. He cared much more about who got the benefits of something rather than who got the credit. He recognized that success was his duty, his obligation, and his responsibility, and he creatively used the gifts and the talents that he had, that he was blessed with, so that he could be a blessing to others. And I want to do that through my volunteer activities. I want to do that through my entrepreneurial activities. I want to do that in every way, everything, every creative expression of gifts and talents that I have. I want somebody else to benefit, and I want my legacy to be one that he is a man who loved unconditionally, who recognized that he was part of humanity. It was the English poet John Donne who said, "No person is an island among themselves. Each is a piece of a continent. Each is a part of the main. What enriches one enriches all, and what diminishes one diminishes all." And so I feel a connection to humankind, and I feel like it's my duty, obligation, and responsibility to help make life a little easier, days a little brighter, opportunities are a lot more accessible in any way that I can. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And normally, at this part of the show, I will wrap up with a little bit of out and about in the community and then some ideas and inspiration. And I'm going to do this very quickly because something that you said gives great pause for a question we can all ask ourselves. And before I share that, I do want to say, if any of our viewers out there are excited this fall to get involved with any opportunities to get out and make change in our political climate, we are looking for people who want to get out and go canvass the neighborhoods and talk to people about upcoming elections. But also, there is a wonderful group called We PAC. It's Women Elect, and it's an organization that was started in Buffalo, New York, that is looking for a few more good women who would like to learn more about the campaigning process and see themselves as potential leaders in public office in coming years. So if either of those things resonate with you, please reach out to me, and I would love to connect you with the appropriate contact. In the meantime, what Cal just shared with us, here's a question that I think we can all ask ourselves, and then we'll let you go for today. So how can I use the blessings of the talents and the gifts I've been blessed with to bless others? That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching The Melissa Killeleagh Show and joining us with our guests here today.